Are oval dining tables the new woodworking trend for 2024? Find out what I think at the end of this video and follow along to see the new tools I buy, the new techniques I learn, and even the new shop I moved to build this custom white oak oval table. One thing I found and do love about social media is that it's been able to connect me with people that I probably would have never met otherwise. In my last video where I made my largest epoxy table, that table was purchased from a client in Arizona that just randomly found me on Instagram. This was also the case with Danielle from Danny California Interiors. She is an interior designer based out of Encinitas, California that found me on Instagram and then messaged me about building a table for her own personal home. Check out her coastal interior design style on our website linked in the description. After sending me a couple of design inspo pics, we decided on this design here, but with her custom dimensions of 90 inches by 50 inches. At this point in my woodworking journey, most of my tables have been made up of live edge slabs or epoxy river tables, so the design for this was something completely different for me, and I was really excited for all the firsts and challenges it proposed. 1. This was going to be my first all-wood dining tabletop. 2. This is going to be the largest wood panel glue up to date. 3. This was also going to be my first oval table. 4. My first time constructing a fluted table base. And finally 5, this was going to be my first time incorporating brass. So being that this was going to be my largest wood panel I had ever glued up to date, I quickly realized my shop wasn't set up for that. So to make things easier on myself and less stressful, I broke up the tabletop into sections of 2 or 3 boards at a time and did smaller glue-ups, and then did one final glue-up at the end. Once the panel was glued together, the next step was to cut out the oval shape, or really the ellipse. I won't go into all the mathematical aspects of what makes an ellipse, but basically every ellipse is an oval, but not every oval is an ellipse. The main takeaway is that an ellipse is mathematically balanced and uniform, while an oval could be many things as long as it is a curved, closed shape. There are a few ways to go about cutting an oval or an ellipse. If the project is small enough, you can purchase a jig like this that Rockler makes, or you could even make your own like this fellow YouTuber. Another method is the string method, which there are plenty of videos on how to do this, but I actually found it really hard to get the exact length and width using this method. Whoa. So this wasn't a good option for me since we were going for an exact 90 by 50 inches. After a bunch of research, I ran into this video right here by Stumpy Nubs. He has a great explanation of how this method gives you the exact measurements you're trying to achieve when cutting an oval. And I'll link all these videos that I've mentioned above in the description. So after making a very crude version of his jig, I tried it out, and it worked perfectly. I got an exact 90 inch by 50 inch ellipse. Next, I could then use my jigsaw to cut as close to the line as possible, and then use a belt sander to sand up to the line to refine the shape. And there you have it, a perfect ellipse. Once it was all cut, I could squeeze this tabletop into my RAV4 and bring it over to my friend Michael at BB Drum Sanding in Santa Ana, California. There, I'll use their wide belt sander to flatten and smooth everything out. Now, it was time for the table base. I had never built a fluted table base before this, and during the research process, I actually had a really hard time finding any how-to videos or instructions that didn't use a cardboard concrete form as the main frame. I honestly didn't think that would be sturdy enough, so this is what I came up with. First, I knew I wanted the end caps to be solid oak, because if the client needed to disassemble the table to move it, I didn't want the ends to just be plywood. And I also felt the solid oak would give the base some extra weight. Next, I began cutting a bunch of 3/4 inch birch plywood circles the same size as the oak circles. Once those were all cut out, I cut some 4x4 Douglas fir framing posts and glued and screwed them in between all the circles, making sure all the circles were properly aligned with each other. I also routed out some handles on the oak end caps to help with transport. Now that the skeleton of the base was all finished up, I glued on some bendable plywood using brad nails to hold it in place, followed by these strap clamps to apply good clamping pressure. Then I proceeded on to cutting all the oak slats. Now prior to this build, I actually didn't own a table saw, only a track saw. And up to this point, most of my work has been with live edge slabs, so I actually really didn't need a table saw, because a track saw is almost like kind of having a portable table saw. But the one thing it can't do that a table saw excels at is repeatable cuts. And since I had to make over 100 of these oak slats, I decided to buy my first table saw. And if there's one piece of advice I can give as someone who is relatively new to woodworking, it's that you should only buy your next tool if you really need it for a current project, or if you have a project that you are planning on doing where that particular tool is essential to completing it. I found that doing it this way really helps you avoid buying a bunch of tools that you may never use, but it also helps you become an expert with the tools you do have, and sometimes forces you to think outside the box whenever you come to a point in a project where you may not have the right tool for the job and can't afford to buy that fancy new tool. Along with the table saw, I also got the MicroGripper, which is really great for thin rip cuts. It's essentially a push stick and a blade guard in one, and it really helped out to make this process feel safe since I was brand new to using a table saw. And so after about 100 rips, I'd say I got the hang of it. Before I attached the slats to the base, I gave each slat a small round over with my router. And I'll link all the tools I use in this video in the description. After a few hours, I glued and nailed each slat onto the base, leaving a 2-inch gap at the bottom for the brass accent. I then trimmed off any of the excess on top with my router using a flush trim bit. So during this build, I was actively looking for a larger shop space and found this local building that had commercially zoned residential warehouse lofts for artists. My wife and I always romanticized living in a space like this, so we applied and to our surprise got approved. It's a really cool space occupied by local artists of all different types of mediums and an amazing rooftop view of Long Beach. I really tried to get this table done before having to make the move, but the whole process happened so fast, I ended up having to finish the table in the new space, which was not easy because before I could actually work in the new shop, I needed to build a wall to separate it from my living space and semi-organize some of my tools, which did add some extra time to the build, but luckily Danielle was very patient with me. So after about a week or two, and now that the shop was a bit more functional, I could finish up the table. The next step was to add the brass accent to the base. I purchased these rolls of brass online and attached them to the bottom of the base with some 24-hour epoxy and strap clamps. And once cured, I cleaned up any residue with acetone. For the finish, we went with 2 coats of Rubio Monocoat Oil Plus 2C in cotton white to match some of Danielle's current pieces and overall modern coastal decor in her Encinitas, California home. I really love how this table came out, and I think it fits her home beautifully. This build had a ton of new challenges I had to work through, and in the end, not only did my shop grow, but I also grew as a woodworker. So to answer the question, are oval dining tables the new woodworking trend for 2024? I'm not so sure, but I sure enjoyed building this one. Would you want an oval dining table in your home? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you found some value in this video, give me a like and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching.